like Michael said, I'm coming from the Department of Philosophy at the University of Kansas, so if you were looking for any kind of definitive answers, you can go ahead and get up and walk out and have yourself a nice early lunch, because as a philosopher I'll just be raising more questions, and this is very much a work in progress, and I'm very thankful to be one of the cohorts from last summer in the Religion and Global Politics. Got to work through a draft of that paper, which eventually got published. So I'm hoping to utilize all of your expertise in order to get another publication. So this is self-serving, so thank you, I appreciate it. Before jumping in, I should acknowledge that this is part of a Templeton Religion Trust grant. I'm working with an interdisciplinary team. The names are up there, right there. And we're investigating into the roles played by intellectual humility, courage, and religious literacy in covenantal pluralism. Most of my work has been on religious literacy, but this interdisciplinary team, we started off with a seed grant, which was a one-year grant that I'll kind of refer to later in the presentation. And then now we're on a 3-year grant where we're working with psychologists, and we have the humanities side, and so we're going to be running some empirical tests and then theorizing about it. And thankfully, Michael has kind of come on board in some sort of capacity, and so I'm very excited about that. Okay, so the question, how can people with deep religious disagreements live together in relationships of mutual respect and cooperation? Well, covenantal pluralism attempts to answer this question. How many people have heard the term covenantal pluralism? Oh, okay, so many people. So it kind of gets going in 2019. Really the three major players, Seipel, Hoover, and Stewart, started working on this concept for the Templeton Religion Trust. And now the Templeton Religion Trust has a covenantal pluralism initiative. A lot of the research is coming out of the review of faith and international affairs, and then there's one major handbook through Rutledge where I would point you there for the most comprehensive account of covenantal pluralism. And then there's this 2-volume set with much more research now in the pipeline. So how do we define covenantal pluralism? Well, that's one of the problems. It's very difficult. When we brought together a whole bunch of religion scholars during the first grant, we brought them to the University of Kansas to work on a definition. And we didn't settle on any kind of definitive definition. There was really a lot of problems because of the interdisciplinary nature of covenantal pluralism, and because covenantal pluralism is in a really holistic framework that's really trying to account for multiple things. There was a lot of problems. But in order for us to kind of have a meaningful conversation about covenantal pluralism, I'll point you to the definition that was given by Stewart, Seipel, and Hoover in their chapter 2 in the handbook. So I'll read this slide. The philosophy of covenantal pluralism reaches beyond banal appeals for peaceful coexistence and instead points to a robust, relational, and non-relativistic paradigm for living together peacefully and productively in the context of our deepest differences. Covenantal pluralism offers a holistic vision of citizenship that emphasizes both legal equity and neighborly solidarity. That is, it calls both for a constitutional order characterized by equal rights and responsibilities, and a culture of engagement characterized by relationships of mutual respect and protection. So there's a lot in there, obviously. The 3 main constitutive dimensions of covenantal pluralism are freedom of religion and belief, religious literacy, and embodiment in the expression of the virtues. So these are what is known as the conditions of possibility, and these are the enabling conditions that are individually necessary and jointly sufficient. So as you'll see, the covenantal pluralism is both top-down and bottom-up. So it's top-down in the sense that we need the political and legal structures that allow for individuals to have freedom of choice, freedom of religion or non-religion expression. But then it's also going to be bottom-up, where we need individuals to have religious literacy, and Stewart and colleagues, they endorsed kind of this cultural competence skill model of religious literacy. So it's going to be beyond like a knowledge base about the religious other. And then there's also going to be this embodiment and expression of virtue. So individuals need to have virtues. So we need to cultivate virtues, and we should think about virtues in the Aristotelian sense, where they're dispositions. So we need the conditions where individuals can manifest these dispositions or virtues. So there's many different pluralisms out there, right? You all probably know way more about other forms of religious pluralism than myself. But from my assessment of covenantal pluralism, there's like two major things that they're trying to add to the religious pluralism literature. And the first one is it's a decoupling of pluralism from relativism. So they introduce this modifier covenant, which we'll talk about because I think there's a challenge here. But it's this idea that we need to be in these very deep and meaningful relationships that are based on mutual respect. One things that is relevant here is they want people to go to the table with their religious and moral commitments. They don't want to mask those moral commitments, and we need to sit across the table from someone that holds completely opposite views to us. And we need to be able to be uncomfortable with that space, and then figure out ways from there to enable the kind of interaction that is going to be peaceful and productive. The second addition that covenantal pluralism is trying to make is it's beyond tolerance. So this is very intuitive, right? We see all these situations in the 21st century that are causing a lot of violence and a lot of trouble. And the point here is tolerance alone is not going to get us to the kind of pluralism that we want to see in our democratic societies. I say democratic societies because one challenge, I think, for covenantal pluralism is it might assume a democratic society, and if that is the case, then it seems like it's a limitation of this approach. Because a lot of the conflicts that we see are not going to be places or contexts where democracy is a thriving system. So one of the things that our team is doing is we're trying to modify the definition. We have a working definition that I was able to put in print, and I define covenantal pluralism as a pattern of interaction across religious boundaries that overall is increasingly peaceful, productive, characterized by engagement, and respectful of difference in the integrity of each party. So part of this definition, there's baked in like this social fact. So we live in the 21st century, it's undeniable that religious diversity is a thing. So this is a social fact, right? And then covenantal pluralism is aiming us towards a very particular kind of pattern of interaction. And so this is where the normative force is coming in. All right, so you may be thinking, I don't really care about covenantal pluralism, or these definitions seem to be overly philosophical, and I don't really care. That's fine. I'm not going to convince you of the utility of covenantal pluralism in 12-minute presentation, because I'm not sold that covenantal pluralism is actually a meaningful term. So in my paper right now, the thesis is like, I'm going to argue for X, but I just put a little placeholder in there, and I might put a negation. So depending on what all you say and the years of working on this project, maybe it will be that covenantal pluralism, actually we should drop it. But I want to kind of hold on to this approach for at least the time being. But one of the things I will say is I'm going to spend the remaining time bringing up some challenges, and if you're more familiar with a different kind of religious pluralism, let's apply these challenges to your preferred form of pluralism. I think we can still have a meaningful conversation about pluralism in general. Okay, so the first challenge is about this modifier covenant. So here's a simple argument. Sorry if that's small for people, but I'll read it out loud here. Covenantal pluralism is designed for interreligious dialogue. Covenant has tradition-specific theological meanings, especially within the Abrahamic religions. Premise 3, Participants in interreligious dialogue will likely understand covenant according to their own religious traditions rather than a secular definition. So we can conclude, covenantal pluralism cannot assume that covenant functions as a shared concept among its participants. So put simply, I'm worried about the referent of covenantal pluralism. Obviously, there's some, in the Abrahamic tradition, this idea of a covenant is like a loaded concept. And so if we're invoking covenantal pluralism in this interreligious space, it seems like the referent for each individual might be different. And then it causes us to worry that we're having some like translational issues. So I worry about this. I should mention that this has been like fought out in the covenantal pluralism literature. Stewart and colleagues, they spend a lot of time arguing that covenant is, they're using this in a secular sense that is inclusive to all other religions and non-religions, but this kind of critique is slightly different than the one that they've addressed. And then the next one is this infrastructure point. So another simple argument here. Premise one, interreligious engagement increasingly occurs in digital spaces. Premise two, if an account of religious pluralism fails to track the actual context in which interreligious engagement occurs, then it ought to be revised. Premise three, covenantal pluralism fails to track the role of digital spaces in contemporary interreligious engagement. Therefore, covenantal pluralism ought to be revised. Don't you guys just love doing philosophy? So I want to spend some time on this. This is like the major contribution that I want to make, and that is very much a work in progress. So last summer I was here and I attended interreligious conferences with the Roland Summer Seminars, and I was struck by the lack of answers or insight we had about what interreligious interaction is going to be like in these digital spaces. Actually, there was one of the interreligious conferences. So sorry, there are two things. One is about human dignity, and the other one is about the actual infrastructures itself. So first point is, I don't know if respecting human dignity looks the same in in-person interaction as it does in virtual spaces or digital platforms. So one person in the audience here, Scott Appleby, had this presentation at this conference, and he was the last presenter that finally made explicit that respect for human dignity is a very contested term. Like, I often get confused when everyone in a conference is using, oh yeah, like, we respect for human dignity, and then move on. Are we talking about this Aristotelian notion of dignity, a Kantian notion, a theological notion? So this is something that I think we need to have more attention at, and we need to be careful how we're using it. But the point for this infrastructure challenge is, what does respect for human dignity look like in these digital platforms? Again, I don't have any answers, so hopefully you do. The second point is about like these algorithms, right? So we're after, covenantal pluralism is after a very particular kind of pattern of interaction, and these kinds of patterns in these spaces, this is going to enable and constrain these certain patterns. So why is this relevant for a panel in religion and global politics? Well, all of you have been doing excellent work in thinking about these political and legal structures. And I think that same kind of attention that we've given to putting human dignity into these constitutions and public policies, now we need to shift this attention to digital spaces. So with time, so I'm right at 15 minutes. I think there's two other really interesting challenges. One is about tolerance. Like in some contexts, I think tolerance is actually going to be the goal and is going to be enough. And covenantal pluralism is really resistance to this notion of tolerance being enough. But we can talk about that in the Q&A, and I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so so much, Ryan. Wonderful presentation. We have a sort of a varieties of pluralism theme going on in this panel, so I want to invite up Magdalena Franz from Dortmund University, who will now, oh great, we have it, give a presentation on another variety of pluralism, how to manage pluralism in regional variations in state-religion relations in Germany. So thank you, Magdalena, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, hi, yeah, like Mike said, my topic is, or the question is, one country, different forms of secularism possible, and I study regional variations in state-religion relations in this, in the case of Germany. So, yeah, Germany is typically treated as a uniform case and classified as a model of a cooperative separation between state and religion. However, there are significant differences when it comes to sociographic terms in form of the federal state. So Germany is a huge tradition of federalism, and there are very strong federal states, and they have the right to shape their own secular system in terms of the constitutional laws that are in Germany uniform, like there is no state church. Yeah, I want to examine these regional variations because there is a lot going on at the same time. We have in most of Germany, or in all federal states, a huge decline when it comes to the church memberships, but in some of the federal states, the religious minority are growing in huge numbers, but they are still treated like minorities. And at the same time, at least one federal state, Bavaria, keeps remaining to say that Bavaria is Christian or Christian Jewish, and we have to. They decided to put a cross in every state building, especially the courts. It has to be visible, and the courts in Bavaria themselves proved, it's okay with our constitution, it doesn't affect state neutrality. So we have this trend of remaining in a strong Christian tradition, as well as losing church members, and have a growing secularization and growing religious minorities. So my research question was, do these differences still form a coherent system of secularism, or are there maybe different parts of secularism in Germany? So I tried to do a comparative analysis of to map these legal and institutional configurations. So why? It's part of my PhD thesis, and I aim to develop a more complex understanding of the German secular system. It will be, it will be the first step, and the second step I want to focus more on the subsystem of the really thing parties or politicians are talking about when it comes to secularism and what are they really understanding of it. But the first step was to map these legal differences, and in the last step I hopefully are possible to answer the question which I'm interested in the most. Where are the current challenges of the German secularism system addressed most effectively? So we have different systems, and which one might be the best for the religious landscape? So why is Germany a good case to study subnational secularism? It's, like I said, a strong federal state, and at the same time it's very diverse when it comes to religious traditions. So we have two strong churches in the history. We have a more Protestant north and a more Catholic south. And we have the east-west or east and western divide. So after World War II, there were two complete different directions when it comes to the state-church relations, because in Western Germany, the churches tried to fill up the lack of morality there was after the Nazi regime, and at the same time in Eastern Germany, in the GDR, they pursued a more repressive policies to religion. And so Eastern Germany is one of the most secular societies in the worldwide comparison, and at the same time we have in Western Germany more Christian-shaped regions and huge increasing communities of religious minorities. So for me, it's an ideal case to study the different secular systems in the state. So, like I said, I try to map in for example, federal states, the legal constitutions. In the south, like I said, it's Bavaria, the blue one, and I think the rest of Germany is still saying, yeah, it's Bavaria, it's a different world. But when it comes to the social science, they only try to cover or to discover the differences between Eastern and Western Germany. So I found nothing about maybe more directions or more different terms. So I have pick North Rhine-Westphalia as the Western case with the Catholic and Protestant tradition, and as well with the with the largest population and the largest population with migration background. The green one is Lower Saxony. It's it's a case for the north, and it's more Protestant. And Brandenburg used to be more Protestant, but now it's a very secular federal state. So these are my cases for the case study. To show it in numbers, it's very hard to find actual numbers of to which religious community people belong, but we have this from the census, and we can see here in North Rhine-Westphalia. Like I said, it's a mixed tradition. These are the official church memberships, but the largest group is at the moment the category other, non or non-answer. In North Rhine-Westphalia and Lower Saxony, if we count these together, there is still a small majority member in the church. In Brandenburg, by far, they are not. There are 83% not member in one of the churches, and Bavaria is. Oh, I wrote it wrong, I think. It's the only country where the hugest group is still in one of the churches. So there are still 44% in the Catholic Church, which is really outstanding. But I mean, the figures are from 4 years ago. It could have been changed at the moment. And these are estimated figures about the Muslim population in Germany. And here we can see that in North Rhine-Westphalia, there are not only more than 1.5 Muslim persons living, but there is only barely 10% of the population, which is a huge difference, especially when it comes to Brandenburg and Eastern Germany, where only 1% is estimated to be Muslim. So here in Brandenburg, it's barely a two-third majority is non-religious and not in a church. So my expectation for these case studies is that there are 3 ways in which the federal states can develop. The first one is the traditional cooperative type, like I expected to see in Bavaria. We stay Christian, we doesn't have to adapt to pluralism, we just stay as it was in the past decades, we did well with it. The next one would be a more pluralism open type, try to stay in this cooperative relationship to religious communities, but to open up for new religious communities because there are more different religious communities. And the third one would be the minimal secularism type, to say, yeah, okay, we cannot stay in this strong relationship to the Christian churches, so we just try to unbond us from religious communities, and we just force a more non-religious state neutrality. So I try to find some indicators for measuring the secularism systems, but I found out very quick that most of the variables they use an international comparison to compare secular systems are not useful here, because things like there is no state church, there is cooperation. It is dealt in our national constitution, so. Yeah, it was not possible to use them, and I focus more on the indicators for the inclusion or exclusion of religious minorities, and to find variables that are fitting in the legal system we have in Germany. For example, the institutionalized cooperation with religious communities, the recognition of the legal status, the religion-related symbol and neutrality policies, because here there are a lot of differences, the education system and its organization, the constitutional status, public holidays and burial love, but yeah, I'm still working on the indicators. And yeah, but here I want to present my first preliminary results. For North Rhine-Westphalia, we have, let's make it quick, a traditional cooperative relationship with Christian churches. It maintains a strong cooperation, and they open up to new religious communities, but which was very, how to say, eye-opening for me. North Rhine-Westphalia is the last federal state that maintained denominational state schools. So they have state schools which are Catholic or Protestant, and I don't see that they would end up to this. Yeah, but they have various forms of religious educations. They have religious education for Catholic, for Protestants, for Orthodox, for Jewish, for Alawites, and for Muslims. And they grounded a Muslim board to try to find the teachers, to educate the teachers at universities, and they decided together which topics are taught in Muslim education at the schools. So I characterize it as an open, pluralistic type, even with a strong Christian tradition when it comes to these state schools. In Lower Saxony, it was historically Protestant, but the influence is declining. We have a new constitution after the reunification from Germany, and they did not mention Christian in it once, which is a huge difference when it comes to North Rhine-Westphalia or Bavaria, where they are still saying that the Christian teachings are the real goal in state schools. They have with 27 recognized religious communities, but they are still open up to the changes that are happening. So from this year on, there will be no Protestant or Catholic education. There will be one Christian education in schools for all, but they are in the same time offering Islamic education as well with an Islamic or a Muslim board for Lower Saxony. An example I found very remarkable is that there are only 2 crosses in the building because of historical reasons. It has something to do with the Nazi time. I'm not sure which exactly, but if any person who claims not to want to see the crosses when they are in court, they will remove them immediately. And so I characterize it as a combination of the declining religious influence as well as a somehow openness to pluralism at the same time. In Brandenburg, there are only 3 recognized religious communities. It's partly to Berlin's role in the middle of Brandenburg as a known federal state, but it's very low in comparison to North Rhine-Westphalia, where there are more than 42 recognized religious communities. The confessional religious education exists only for Catholic and Protestants, but it's not mandatory because compulsory is a subject for all students called life skill, ethics, religion. There's no reference to Christianity or Christian values in the Constitution. There is no mentioning of God in the preamble, so on the symbol, from a symbol view, there is no strong reference to God as well. So I characterize it as a minimal secularism. And here the last one, Bavaria, it's, like I said, it's a very strong Christian context where this constitution was written because the Democrats had the majority for the constitutional board. It's clearly reflected. There are 22 recognized religious communities, no Muslim community. Like I said, there is this unique, controversial cross decrees in courts and primary schools, and they keep on to declare it as a Christian-Jewish symbol, the cross. Religious education is offered to some religious communities as well to Islam, but there is no Islam board, and the state decides alone who teaches and what are the topics to teach, which is very unique for religious education in the system. So even there are some adaptations to the religious pluralism, I would say they continued to be a Christian, or to see themselves as a Christian federal state, and to keep the old secular term. So my conclusion is that there are, at the moment I see that Germany is a less uniform model and has a more federal spectrum of different forms of state-religion relations, which opens up to normative questions like, what is the best way to deal with the pluralism? Is it really, can they really keep on with going to prefer one religion in Bavaria, for example? There is a debate going on over religious symbols in the state sphere when it comes to court or to schools. And the question whether the cooperative model will remain sufficiently inclusive for new religious and worldview actors, or would it maybe be the best to broaden up the cooperation to new religious groups, or to do it like in Brandenburg or Eastern Germany to reduce the religious communities because there will be too much and it will be a much effort. I really want to go through this in my PhD, and I'm excited. What is your opinion or your tips? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magdalena. I'm going to invite up Peter Zizek from the University of Harvard, who will offer a few minutes of discussion. I'm mostly focused on the paper of Ryan, and then I'll offer just a few questions for Magdalena. Come.
Should we bother two speakers here and then work?
You want to come up, Ryan?
So I just want to thank both authors, just really fascinating papers. It was really interesting to kind of see the connections between the papers. Thinking about, teasing out new layers and questions. It's about current models of pluralism, encountering difference in purportedly neutral spaces. Also, both papers kind of in different ways are complicating the effects on the ground of our societies, and also complicating the frameworks in which we're trying to think about pluralism, pluralistic societies. So sort of with Ryan, it's a really fascinating kind of paper on covenantal pluralism, thinking about the definition, the scopes, and the challenges of the framework of covenantal pluralism. Asking a very important question, a central question that we're all grappling with. How can people with deep religious disagreements live together in relationships, mutual respect and cooperation? A very good question, but a very important question. Kind of expanding earlier scholarship, kind of showing how covenantal pluralism is bringing the human being to the fore, this holistic framework, this trying to offer a framework in which things are not left at the door, as is often the case in a purportedly secular framework. It was really new extension of this. Some questions maybe just to spur conversation. So you mentioned that earlier scholars are talking about it, but just maybe sitting with and talking together about is the concept, is the term covenantal problematic? Can it be problematic in a pluralistic space only because of the history of that term? And again, this isn't a new question, but I think I was thinking about, is there anything in particular that is special about that term that we have to hold on to, that it offers a new dimension that other words can't? I'm thinking a lot of what covenantal pluralism, it might be in conversation with social contract theory, political philosophy, but it might want to think about the contractual pluralism. Is there something in covenantal that we have to hold on to? And if so, how do we deal with historical, conceptual attachments and histories of those terms? And I'm just wondering, how much of this, I picked up on the word relational in one of the definitions. This is a very relational framework. I'm wondering how much of this might just historically, think about intellectual history, have a root in, say, Trinitarian ontology, Trinitarian frameworks of ontology, ideas of the human being. What do you do about that? I mean, if it is thinking about the language of relationality, do we have to be honest about claiming other legacy if it's there, being honest about it, or is it coming from somewhere else? Or do we not have to claim Trinitarian ontologies for that relationality? I'll simply end on the question you ended with, which is a very interesting question for this: is tolerance enough, or is it not? Should I also respond to Magdalena or no? So, it's also Magdalena, thank you. A fascinating paper. It's a different paper, but still, again, I think there are interesting connections here. It's posing the question: is there really a coherent and universal system of secularism across Germany, or as the literature suggests, or is it more complex? And I think you are pointing out that it's much more complex on the ground. We're just looking at these 4 different case studies. Some questions for you as well. Is your claim that Germany no longer has a single viable model of secularism, or is it that cooperative secularism is flexible enough to incorporate different kind of multiple regional variants of the experience? So, again, is there no longer one singular viable model, or is it that there are multiple frameworks coexisting? So, just thinking about teleology of your conclusion. Where do you want to bring the conclusion to? In your paper, you bring in all these kind of fascinating indicators, like burial law, religious education. Might you distinguish just in your analysis between core and secondary indicators in all the indicators you're bringing up? How are you defining inclusion? Is it legal equality? Is it symbolic recognition? Is it political participation, subjective belonging, or something else? So just thinking about how those might produce different evaluations and institutional arrangements on the ground. But just some questions. Again, I really appreciate both your papers, and I think interesting convergences to be had. Michael?
Thanks so much, Peter. Yeah. Thanks so much, Peter. I really want to get questions from the audience because we have such a wonderful round of expertise. So maybe just one additional question to Magdalena from my part, and that's I like very much the idea of going to the subnational. So I think that's an innovation, and we should be working a lot on subnational forms of secular, subnational forms of religious state arrangements. So I applaud you for that. The mapping is very nice. I think I would like to see some more theorization still. So that's sort of like problem. What is, and so maybe this is first question is, what is this leading up to? What do we learn not just about the facts, the social facts of these religious state arrangements, but what is it telling us about secularism in general? And just to push that a little bit, you end with these categories which I think are useful, and is one of the questions there is, is this actually working? I mean, is that kind of the hidden, is there an empirical question? Are some of these forms working better than others in the management of diversity? And what do they tell us about our understanding of secularism in general? So this label about minimal secularism, which I thought was interesting, and that was sort of jogging in my mind is, so what is minimal in relation to? What image or what model of secularism did you have that this was minimal from? Was there a maximal form of secularism that you were thinking, and was that sort of the ideal that you were thinking was better? On inclusion, just Peter, brought this into the conversation. I was interested in this life skills, thing, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as a form of minimal secularism, which I don't know very much about. But the fact that it's mandatory reminds me of the mandatory religious education that came beforehand, which was seen as exclusionary because it was mandatory, right? So, is there a risk that something like a life skills ethics is experienced as also exclusionary to different religious faiths? I was just curious about that. Let's grab a round of questions here. Yes, please identify yourself and question short.
Hi, my name is Sophie Bertlein from the Humboldt University in Berlin. Thank you very much, both of you, for your presentations, and Magdalena, thank you very much for your presentation. I found it super interesting. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your methodology, because I wasn't sure, are you doing like a discursive analysis on the constitutions and the school curricula, or what are you looking into? And then connected to this, are you also looking into maybe the differences between the practice and the theoretical framework of religion or secularism within the federal states? Because I was immediately thinking of the example of Berlin and the Neutralitätsgesetz, so neutrality law, in which several parties argued in very Protestant rhetorics, but towards aiming a secular neutrality, whatever this means. So, yeah, thank you.
Bring in some new voices back here, yes. Yeah, go ahead. And then Tim.
Yes, just a short question, and it dovetails what Michael has already asked you. What's your working definition of secularism? Because I'm also working on this in a, this is a self-serving question, but because I'm working on this from the perspective of like, from the perspective of time. I have one case study, and then I look at different instances of state control of religion. Of course, I have a very partial understanding of what secularism is, and I track that over time, and I find your study quite, it's the same but different from mine, and so I'm very much excited to hear what you think about it, and what could you theorize from that.
Who are you?
Yes, who am I? I'm Jethro Kalakdai from Cambridge.
Timothy Magdalena, Notre Dame. Ryan Wolsey, thank you very much. Ryan, I take it the two big things that you're looking for are how to avoid a kind of a lowest common denominator expression of religious agreement across traditions, and then secondly, something deeper than tolerance, like a mutual appreciation. I also hear you saying that the language of covenantal pluralism is still being worked out and complicated in definition. So I'm wondering, and here's another very loaded term, but I think in some of the historical instances where interreligious dialogue worked, we talked about a mutual search for truth. I'm thinking about, despite all the negative examples from my own Catholic background and the negative examples of the Iberian Peninsula, there are moments when you have Jewish, Muslim, and Christian scholars searching for truth together, based on the belief that there is a truth to be found, and that my partner in this dialogue has things that are known that are going to help me dig deeper. I don't think any of them ever had the idea that somehow they were going to convert one another, but they saw deep, deep value in the exchange. So I'm wondering, even universities, we don't use this word truth anymore, and with good reason. It's been used as such a weapon, and again, from my own Catholic background, we use it as a weapon to destroy other people, because we have the truth and you don't. But we shy away from this. But religious people actually believe that their religion contains truth. And if the goal of conversing with another who has the same deep conviction that their religion has some kind of truth, why couldn't the goal be, rather than dialogue, learning from the other, and that the dialogical, unitive would kind of be a byproduct of a mutual search for truth? I realize that's every bit as complicated as you're trying to use the words that you're using, but I wonder if there might not be some advantages of using that kind of language to talk about what we're trying to do to fulfill those two worthy goals. We don't want lowest common denominator. I'm sorry to say, sometimes religion scholarship is exactly what we get. Well, all the religions are kind of exactly the same, they just name it differently. That doesn't satisfy religious people, the people that we study. And then mere tolerance, of course, is obviously cannot be the ultimate goal. As you've said rightly, it's helpful in many instances, it's a stepping stone, it's not the ultimate goal. Thanks again. I'm glad to hear that you and so many others are struggling with these important issues.
Thank you. My question also goes to Ryan on covenantal pluralism, and I'm thinking, despite the different conceptions of this concept, different definitions, what is the major definition? Is it a moral theological definition that you see when you look at the definitions, or a political definition or conception? Is it majorly political or moral theological? I'm asking this question because most of the times where there have been pluralities and divisions, religious divisions, it's majorly a political question, regardless of the theological ideas that make this political question. We can base from a theological standpoint to become divided people, but majorly why the division manages to stand and becomes a tool is because of politics. So how do you look at, what are the definitions telling us when you look at them?
We have more questions. I think we may be able to get two rounds, but go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly to Magdalena. A question about umbrella federation. So the German system, because it lacks of a recognition at the central level, but so force religions to find a legitimation on the state level. What happens when religions try to maximize their benefit by unifying themselves, and so by doing a general federation that maybe lacked at the single state level the strength to be recognized at the level of the single lender. So this question of umbrella federation, like for example for Buddhism in Germany, how you can cope this local level with the general one when umbrella federation can be the strength to be to the local, the political force to obtain their own legitimate status of the recognition.
I think that's a good set of questions to begin with, and I'm going to do a branding. There you go.
Yeah, thank you for the good comments and questions. The first question, what is this telling us about secularism in general? This is a very interesting one, and I still try to figure it out, and I'm not as far with the theoretical concept like I want to be at this point. But I think it's important, at least for the federal states, to cover them more in a more complex way when it comes to the guarantee of religious freedom and rights. But I have to figure it out. My concept of secularism, I try to focus it. So I have to say I studied a little bit of law in Germany as well, and maybe it's where the definition comes from the German constitutional law, but right now I'm treating secularism as the institutional framework which allows for individuals and communities religious freedom as well as the state neutrality, and it's part of the negative religious freedom is there as well. So it's a very law framework, but I would love to work with other frameworks or other concepts of secularism, like secularism can be a very inclusive step when it comes to integrate persons from other religious minorities to the state. Like Tarek Mloud is understanding it. It's very, it inspires me, and I want to try to work with it. When it comes to, so Sophie, thank you for your comment as well. My methods, so it's like I said, I'm not far as well, unfortunately. So I want to more standardize the indicators and to put on variables and to say, okay, if you fit on this indicator with this, then it's a part of this type. But but I hadn't the time to do it as for now. So I said it's initially results, and I just try to cover every federal state from my case study, and right now it's more qualitative, and I try to compare the constitutions and the different laws, but it's very patchwork working, because it's hard to find numbers for religious minorities, to find all the laws, and it's more descriptive detective work at the moment. So I hope I didn't forget anything. To the umbrella question, I'm not sure if I got it right, but it was a question how to be a local group, like a Buddhist can...
But also federal at the same time.
Yeah, it's federal. I'm not sure for the Buddhist example, but they are like a lot of the minorities stronger in the federal state with bigger cities, so it's not for most of minorities it's not a trend from the countryside, but in the cities. So I would accept that in federal states like Bremen, Hamburg, Berlin, they are have better chances to get this legal status of a corporal state organization. Sorry, maybe you can. Maybe we can discuss it later. I need more time to think about it.
Great, thanks for the excellent set of questions. So I'll start with this question of what is special about Covenant. I think this is a really great question, and this is kind of what I was getting at with the referent. I think it's worth us thinking about what is worth holding on to, and I guess coming from the covenantal pluralism literature, the motivation here is that this is a relational framework, but they want to push this relation to something more meaningful, of mutual respect. And so I think they intended this covenant to be, it's this deep, beyond like a contract where we enter in, it's something beyond a contract. And it might not be equal, but even though it's not equal, we're still going to maintain this respect for the religious other because we're in this covenant with this other human. But I think this is worth thinking more about. Is tolerance enough? One scholar that I love all of his work is Kevin Schilbreck, and he has this idea of conditional hospitality, and I use it in my religious literacy work, where it's actually can be seen as not virtuous to entertain like someone that is promoting violence. So this is the problem of like fundamentalism or dogmatism. So how can we maintain at the table with people that hold these views that are in opposition to ours, but also have this like violent agenda? And this is why I think tolerance is conditional, because if we entertain that kind of perspective, then we are not maintaining our own moral characters. But here again, like, where do we draw that line? And now we're in the world of normative talk, which I'm comfortable with, but this is very difficult in like an interreligious space. So this kind of segues into the nice comments and questions about mutual search for truth. I like truth talk as a philosopher, but I really liked how you put this point focusing on the process, and maybe not capital T truth, but lowercase t truth. And so why don't it kind of reminded me of scriptural reasoning, where people come together on a college campus and they read each other's scriptures and they talk about their particular truths. And seeing that process, I think there's going to be similarities, and maybe that's one tactic for showing that there's similarities in the process, not necessarily the truth, that we can then like work together. One thing I definitely want to avoid perennialism. I think that too often it's the case in the interfaith literature and interfaith practice where we kind of mask over these deep differences. And I take covenantal pluralism to be drawing out those differences. And the process of drawing out those differences and addressing them head on, that's where we're going to actually see change in the world. And so some of the early like agendas of interfaith, it was like good to bring people together and discuss these differences, but we kind of soften those differences in order to get like social progress up and running, or different charities. But if we want a kind of pluralism that helps us solve 21st century challenges, we need to really address those differences head on. And then finally, the definition, what is the definition telling us? I think you're pointing at a huge limitation of everything that I've said. I don't know enough about the political stuff, and this is where I'm going to tap Michael, and he's going to inform me all the things that I'm missing, because, the political dimension, I focus more on individual and like virtues and religious literacy, and this is all individual stuff, but the kind of top-down processes, this is a huge limitation for my research and also the team that I'm a part of. We don't have a political scientist on our team, and that is a huge problem, and this is why we've brought in some consultants to fill that void. And hopefully with presenting at conferences like this one, I'll be able to kind of point, avenues will be shown to me that I can explore to address that limitation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Yes, we have another round. There was a number of questions. Well, yes, excellent. Let's do this. All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel Katongo, University of Notre Dame. The question goes to Ryan. A kind of overall, a broader question between theory and practice. Of course, as a philosopher, I think you are mostly dealing with the whole question of theorization of what happens. But I'm wondering, where have you seen this covenantal pluralism at work in the world? What's the relation between those particular concrete examples, cases, and what you are trying to get to? Or is the goal to clarify these notions so that you can prescribe them as the way to deal with the relationship, or you are looking concretely at successful places and cases where that has happened, and kind of theorizing out of that? I'm not so sure that I get what the overall goal of your project. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emmanuel. Scott Appleby, and then move it backwards.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate all the effort you're making on the term covenantal pluralism. I guess my question is more procedural or methodological in a way. Having, across my career, having to deal with terms like fundamentalism, which I woke up for 6 years in a row hating vehemently every morning, but was stuck with it. Now we're trying to advance integral human development. You mentioned the reference to dignity through the Ansari Institute and the Kyoto School, another big term. And we've already talked a lot about all the challenges with such a term. My question or comment is, what is the strategy? You've kind of can you be more explicit about the strategy to not allow the inevitable, maddening, infuriating contestation over any term you choose as a comparative blanket term? What is the strategy not to allow that controversy, which could plague you forever, not to disable any substantive work on the project, while at the same time not abandoning you've got to have a concept, you've got to have something that resonates. I'm not sure covenantal pluralism is ever going to convince non-evangelical Christians, no matter what you do. But that's the term you're kind of, when I say stuck with, I don't mean that so pejoratively, but you have to deal with it. This is the grant, this is the reality, or you'll spend the next 6 months, 2 years finding another equally inadequate contested term. So how do we think about ways of, on the one hand, needing to have these comparative terms that are really baggy and not specific and can offend just about anyone, and at the same time, needing that, but how do you proceed? You kind of said a couple times, well, I don't like this term, I'm just gonna move forward. Well, that could be a little, maybe that's a rhetorical move on your part. If you're really serious about that, how do you get away with it? Because it could be kind of a glib response to a really deeper problem, which is, gee, I've got constituents, and certain kinds of constituents, certain kinds of funding, certain kinds of expectations. I'm stuck with this term, and how do I maneuver within it? You're getting at all that, and I appreciate the struggle with it, but it's a problem, and I'd be happy to learn at this late date for me how to do this.
Thanks, Scott. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to want to get to several of them. Tao had his hand up for a while.
Yes, my name is Tao. I'm doing my PhD at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands. I'm also a member of the Ramsey seminars this year. Thank you both for your fascinating projects and presentation. My question, one comment and one question for Magdalena. So I'm also working on the history of different state religion arrangement in Vietnam. So I also touch on post-colonial secularism, and as you may already know, the literature is vast and the endless discussion of what definition of secularism we have, and whether it's neutrality, like you say, but also in your presentation you bring up equal treatment, non-discrimination between different religious groups. So my tiny advice, or maybe comment, or just be very upfront about it, and then choose like a working definition that you work with. that also allow you enough space to maneuver. Because if you say that it's equal treatment, there's many indication in your presentation that show that the state is not neutral and is not equal toward different religious groups, and what does it mean to continue calling it a secular state, for example. So just your working definition that give you enough space to maneuver, like a state management of religion, and it can change and can adapt according to regional situation and historical context, I think. A question, so because you mentioned religious symbol in the public display, like in court, and because we're in Italy, and you say that you study law, I'm going to bring up the case of Lozzi v. Italy, 2011. Have you heard about this case at the European Court of Human Rights? Okay, so the court decided that the state violate atheist student in the classroom because it exhibit crucifix in the public classroom, but then it went to the Grand Chamber, and the Grand Chamber actually reversed the initial decision because it's called the crucifix is a passive symbol and it's tied to Italian heritage. So my question is, have you come across this discussion of religious and cultural heritage, and how can this language offer like a lens for the state to negotiate this Christian heritage, and whether this debate come up in, like you say, the rise of religious minority, but also immigration discussion and the rise of foreigners, and how does this discussion of Christianity is at the core of the national identity of Germany, for example. Thank you.
Two very syncretic questions. I know you both of you have hands up. So.
Isaac Portilla, Tampere University. My question is for Ryan. Covenantal pluralism. Covenantal is a traditionalistic term. Pluralism, postmodern term, different values, different sensitivities. Is it an attempt to bring a traditionalistic outlook to pluralist discourses? What are the limitations in terms of truth pursuing inquiry then? Thank you.
Hello, so George once again from this Symposium. Magdalena, first of all, thank you for the courage for presenting your preliminary results here to this audience. You have to have some courage to do it. My question is quite simple. It's more or less the same as Michael. I had it here. The theoretical framework, if you can say, for instance, after describing what secularism is in terms of the operative concept, etc. If in Germany, can you talk about multiple secularisms? If this discussion that you are having with us and with you, in your PhD thesis, is about or not these multiple modernities, multiple secularities, multiple afterwards secularisms. If you can speak about that in... Or do you want me already to stop?
Yes. I'm putting the pressure on.
I know. So if you can put your debate in this debate. Ryan, thanks so much for this. This brings me back to my master's thesis in terms of the discussion between John Rawls and Jürgen Habermas, and the idea of overlapping consensus, and actually, once again, to the idea, eventually, of the post-secular age of Habermas. I'm not sure if you are going there or not, or if you are trying to have a new, let's put it like this, social religious contracts. Is this what you're aiming for? A new social religious contract? And really just to stop, Peter Berger, in the last book, I think, The Many Altars of Modernity, he said one thing, that modernity doesn't lead to secularization, but one element in between, pluralism or diversity, cultural diversity, leads to secularization. So this is more or less a challenge, because what he says is that this can lead to two ways. The first one, relativization, like the first wave, secularization as relativization, or to balkanization. More or less what I said about bloc politic and the idea of this new neo-nativism. My question is, if this covenantal pluralism is not going for relativization, is not going to balkanization, it is in between? Is it your goal to search for this compromise in a sense?
Thank you very much. I know I have one last question. You guys have a lot on your plate, so bon appetit, as they say. One last question, my Simon.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. I'm Simon Verlinde from Utrecht University. I have a quick question since we have a panel on theological literacy tomorrow. Have you ever thought about the concept of theological literacy in relationship to covenantal pluralism? Thank you.
We have one last question from the chair. I have some experience with covenantal communities in the United States, and when they talk about covenantal communities, they mean covenants that are written down and signed with the blood of the Lamb. Is that what you're talking about? And is this, going back to Emmanuel's question, is this an actual covenant that's written, a contract? How do they think about it?
By the referent, which the referent for these kinds of communities is going to be that, so then it calls into question, well, maybe there's a better term than covenant, or we just need to spend some time qualifying that term. To getting to the question of the goal, this was me not being too clear, so I appreciate this. So we're really, this 3-year grant that we're on, we're really focused on individuals. So our psychologists are trying to develop a new metric, the metric being covenantal pluralism. This is a tall order, so they think that it is something different that is not reducible to intellectual humility and courage. So these have their own metrics. They're trying to develop an original metric that is measuring people's degrees of covenantal pluralism. And the thought is those with high levels of intellectual humility, of courage, and of religious literacy are going to be ones that will enter into these spaces and exemplify a particular pattern of interaction, i.e. covenantal pluralism. This problem of methodology, so just kind of trying to work through a response to Professor Appleby's point. I think this is why we could give an argument for the importance of interdisciplinary teams. Coming together and then getting all these challenges and then modifying our concepts based on what people say. I think this does connect to what the goal is. Given that we have these psychologists that are going to be running these studies, I think we need to receive that data and then based on the theorizing that we've done so far, we might need to modify our definitions in order to fit what the data is telling us. And I think this is where Michael is coming in to play too, is thinking about the political structures. Well, we haven't spent enough time doing that. So we need to think about those things and maybe modify based on what that data tells us. Maybe I'll pass and kind of regain my thoughts and then I'll come back to some of the other questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Tal, for your good advice and the question. There is a discussion about religion being a cultural heritage, and the Christ Democrats and other groups, but especially the Christian Democrats, are using the debate about a guiding culture in Germany in terms of being a post-migration country and try to establish that this is still a Christian country, even if there are only 50% of the population official members in the churches, and this doesn't say anything about their religiosity, which I think is considered to be less than 50%. But at the same time, the Christian churches, for example in Bavaria, they don't want to be the cross and symbol for the state. They say who uses the cross as a symbol for Jewish and Christian culture didn't understood it as well. They don't want their religious terms to be the symbol for a state and the culture, because we didn't have anything from Kant or I don't know the categorical imperative at the wall. It's just a cross. It's not enough to cover all of it, and it's a misunderstanding of it, and the church doesn't want to be only the culture. So this debate is going on, and it's clear that some of the groups, they don't want to be, like George said, they don't have theology, they just want to have the identity to be exclusive and to say, we are anti-Islam and we are not an Islamic country. I know this debate, but I would say in terms of the religious freedom, it's for the churches to, it's still a Christian symbol. You can't say it's a Christian-Jewish symbol. For me, it doesn't make sense. When we come to the theoretical framework and the multiple modernities and secularisms, I'm still asking, are the differences that I found at the moment are enough to form different types of secularism? And I think it depends on my definition. When I'm going with the definition I said before, that it is the institutional framework about how religious communities are treated, that they have the freedom, individual and for collectives, and it's a question of state neutrality, we can argue, no, it's not enough to form different types of secularism. It's different tendencies in between one form. But when I would use definition when it comes to secularism as a possibility for state integration, to integrate new forms of people with other religious, with other religions, then I would say it can differ, and then we have different forms, because one of them are clearly accepting the religious pluralism and try to open up, and others, they don't do it, and they try to save this Christian tradition. And this brings me back to a question I forgot to answer from you about this new education, life learning skills in Brandenburg, because at the first moment it seems to be more inclusive because it's for everyone and you have different religions and worldviews educated there, but it's not mandatory for all of them, because if you are, you can go, all of them are allowed to go there, but if you decide to go into religious education, which is only offered for Catholics and Protestants, then you don't have to, then you can skip it. So I would say it's a mixture between inclusiveness and exclusiveness, because for the recommended, for two religions, it's still possible to skip this and to have their own religious education, because that's a constitutional background, but for other religious communities, there's not the possibility to skip it. Yeah, so I think for me, the major point is to find my working definition for secularism, and maybe then a lot of the other questions are easier to be answered.
No, I'm good.
But thank you all.
Let's give them all a round of